evacuation in 12 years is underway. More than 650,000 Miami-Dade residents told to leave their homes. Mandatory evacuation orders issued across 8 counties in Florida. We are live in South Florida and up the coast in South Carolina as Hurricane Irma is barreling its way towards the Sunshine State. Good morning to meteorologist Stephanie Abrams, along with my colleagues Jim Cantori, who is live in Miami, Jen Carfagno, who is live in Charleston, South Carolina. I am in Delray Beach, Florida this morning. Let's give you the latest on Hurricane Irma. Already a deadly path across the Caribbean. Take a look at the video that was just sent into us from the Turks and the Caicos. Powerful wind blowing trees and sending branches flying. Here is the latest that we know. Hurricane Irma blamed for at least 12 deaths in the Caribbean. Hurricane warnings in place for millions along the Florida coast from Jupiter Inlet to Bonita Beach. Storm surge warnings also in effect along the coast from Naples to West Palm Beach. The U.S. Postal Service has suspended deliveries in South Florida until further notice. And we just got the 5 a.m. advisory with Irma. Finally, after a couple days of this being a Category 5, we are down to a Category 4. Winds currently at 155 miles an hour. Now, it's not like you can breathe a sigh of relief because a Cat 5 is 157, just for the record, and a Category 4 obviously extraordinarily powerful, and this could fluctuate as we head over the next couple of days. We do anticipate this coming into Florida right on that border of Cat 4, Cat 5, and it's moving west-northwest at 16 miles an hour. We do have the potential for very high waves with this as well. 30 to even 40 feet as you head close to the center, and surge is going to be a problem. Mainly there into the Turks and Caicos is where we'll see 15 to 20 feet, also portions of the Bahamas. And then as we head towards Florida, it looks like a 5 to 10 foot surge on the East Coast. And by the way, even when this thing is pulling away on the west side of Florida, you're still going to have that onshore push. So don't think that the surge is going to be over once the wind and the rain is over. So we have our advisories here, hurricane warnings there into the Bahamas, Cuba, also into Haiti, of course. Those are extending into Florida. Jim is going to cover that side of the story momentarily for you. Hurricane force winds, those are extending out 70 miles from the center. You see what happens is, have you heard eye wall replacement? Have you heard that term? Well, when that happens, sometimes you get those winds to expand, and that's what we've been seeing here. So if this goes right up the state of Florida, 70 miles east of the center, 70 miles west, we're talking hurricane force winds. That's almost the entire state, you guys. Tropical storm force winds certainly covering the state out 185 miles from the center. The satellite imagery, it looked like we were seeing that, eye wall kind of falling apart there at the beginning of those images, but then it just cranks back here. Remember, this is going to be in very warm water as it is approaching Florida, and there's really not much to stop it. Those islands aren't going to do too much to this thing. Radar is showing that heavier rain that's coming into the Bahamas. By the way, with these outer bands, you do have to worry about severe weather as well, so that's something that we'll continue to focus on. But we can show you hour by hour those bands coming through the Bahamas, and eventually, really, today's your last day to get prepared. Tomorrow is when you're really going to have to be buttoned down and ready to go. Sunday, of course, is when we will feel the worst effects of this, but rainfall is going to be problematic here. We could see up to 8 to 12 inches when all is said and done into South Florida. That rain is actually going to extend into Georgia. And speaking of Georgia, this easily could be a Category 1 when it's in Georgia. So if you're in Georgia, I need you to start paying attention. The same to South Carolina. Even if we don't get a landfall, we're talking about an onshore push into Charleston, and that means that we could see flooding. All right, so we're going to talk more about that in a minute, but first we want to go to Jim here. And Jim, as far as I can tell, as far as I can see, everybody is taking this extremely seriously. I haven't heard of anyone slacking off. I haven't seen any tape on the windows, so people seem to be doing it right here, doing the best they can.
Steph, you know what I think it is? It's the governor setting the tone. Okay, he set the tone the other day. I mean, the tweet that he put out about closing down all the schools, all the colleges, all the universities, pretty much across the state. I mean, that's a very telling tale right there, because of the fact that this thing is going to split the uprights, come right up through Florida. I think that is what has caused this whole area to take it very, very seriously.
Yeah. And Jim, this is worst case scenario when it comes to a hurricane, because, those hurricane force winds are going to extend out really to either coast as of right now. And Jim, you mentioned the governor. I want to say he actually is saying if you feel like you can't get out, call this number, 1-800-955-5504. And Jim, I know you're going to focus on Florida. My one note here for everyone, don't pay attention to the center of this thing.
No. No, don't, because it may shift a little bit to the west even further. I mean, right now there's a difference between our best models in east side and certainly even west side, which takes more. The European, which is the better model, takes more of the Keys and more of Southwest Florida into the mix. Yep. So please keep that in mind. Good talk, Steph. Let's talk about what we got going on. This is what we've seen pretty much all. I'm going to start with the video, guys. People just filling up gas, long lines. I'm not sure yet if more gas has been brought in down here. I'm going to have to check on that, but either way, it is just long lines everywhere, and these extended all the way up into Georgia. I-75 yesterday, we saw this in Lake City. We saw this up through Macon as well. This is just people that are getting up and getting out. Either it's through the airport or whatever. And that's what we're going to continue to see. All right, let's get to the maps here, guys. Lots to talk about. I want to give you all the latest data that we have. Again, there has been no major shift in the cone this morning. The new information, as Steph talked about, is the fact that we have a Cat 4 versus a 5. But you know what? Here's the deal. This could fluctuate. It could actually go back up. That's not the forecast, but it could go back up. Here are the hurricane warnings, and they do include, again, Naples, and they do include Miami as well as West Palm and all of the Keys. This is where we're going to see the worst of this. As we go on in time, we will see these warnings more than likely advanced to the north, because this is still going to be a hurricane all the way up through Orlando. It is going to be potentially hurricane impacts in Tampa with a north wind, and also in Daytona and maybe even Jacksonville. So expect these warnings, just based on time, to advance off toward the north as well. All right, here's why we may see a little bit of a bump up in fluctuation. We actually have warmer water before this gets to Florida. And that's the problem. We've seen a lot of storms in past history explode over these warm waters. So even though, again, intensity forecasts keep it at Cat 4 strength from this point, just watch it, okay? The point is, too, it's not going to weaken all that much. If we go down 5 miles an hour, I think that's a blessing. But you know what? The outcome is going to be the same. We're talking about a very destructive hurricane here coming into South Florida. That's what I want you to think about. I caution you as you look at these models. Again, this is a high-resolution model. It may be a little bit east biased, if you will, as this comes into motion here as we get in towards Saturday. But notice as we do get into Saturday during the day, your takeaway from this is we're going to start getting into some of these outer bands. As a matter of fact, there's already some high cloud that's coming into South Florida. We're going to get into some of these outer bands probably in the afternoon. So you do still have all day today, and you do still have tomorrow morning, I think, for a good part of the morning to wrap things up. But by the time we get into the afternoon, conditions are going to deteriorate rapidly. Again, this is not an end-all solution here. This center could easily be moved 30, 40, 50 miles to the west of where it is. All right, that's not exactly where it may go. And I want you to not focus in on that center, even though we have to show it to you, because I wanted to show you when the bands are going to start getting in here. Again, guys, what is going to steer this thing as we work our way into next week is the fact that we're going to watch a ridge of high pressure continue to spill down continental polar air. That gradient between the hurricane and that high is just going to allow big waves and big water to pile up on the East Coast beaches. All right, that is going to be an issue here. And as this thing moves to the north, even though it weakens, there will be a surge component coming up through the Georgia coast as well as the South Carolina coast. And that's important, too, for people in Charleston, South Carolina. Jen Carfagno is standing by in Charleston. Jen, let's see here. We've got a couple of major rivers coming in to a very, very low spot and a beautiful spot in our country. That could mean some problems with water there.
Indeed, Jim Cantor. You know, I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, where they are operating under a state of emergency, urging preparedness already. Going ahead and cleaning out storm drains and making sure city buildings are ready for this hurricane, no matter what state and what experience we get by the time it gets up to this area. And track will matter in terms of significant impacts, but we're going to feel it no matter what. This is a very large hurricane. If you look at the tropical storm force winds, it extends out over 175 miles for the center. So regardless of the track, we will feel impacts here in South Carolina. And the governor is urging preparedness.
Be prepared and start now. Just imagine that this hurricane will be here in the morning, and do what you need to do right away before something ends up taking a lot of your time and interrupts your preparations and you don't have time to do it, because it is coming.
And they are not officially evacuations yet in South Carolina, but if they are issued, the governor said they may start on Saturday at 10. But again, that is yet to be determined. There are evacuation orders in South Georgia. Governor Nathan Deal there has issued evacuations for areas east of 95. That includes Chatham County. That includes Savannah. So evacuations there are ongoing today. Let's talk about the forecast a little bit, because I want to talk about this track and the fact that if you've been watching the cone, and I know you are watching it very specifically, how it's expanded a bit and moved towards the west. That does not at all pull us out of the cone here in Charleston. In fact, very much in it. And knowing the size of the system, that we will feel the impacts far away from the center. Those tropical storm force winds will start to be felt on Sunday here. And they will continue with the peak winds coming to our way on Monday. As we take a look at the timing of this, expecting Sunday night throughout the day on Monday into even Monday night, with winds that could take down power lines, take down trees. And that's going to be a big concern throughout the low country of South Carolina and into Georgia as well. When we look at those tropical storm force wind probabilities, certainly in South Florida in the short term, that's what we're focusing on, because that's where the direct landfall will be. But as we expand out in time, the probabilities are lower simply because it's out in time. So as you look at products like this, know that those probabilities will go up as we get closer to the track of Irma getting to us here. We are under the aware threat index here in South Carolina. You can see the whole area from South Carolina to Georgia, even back, into North Carolina, including Charlotte, and then back to Atlanta in Georgia. This whole area needs to be very aware of what's coming with Irma, because it will mean at least tropical storm force conditions, the heavy rain, as well as winds that are going to disrupt travel. Steph, we know already travel, of course, is a big challenge in Florida as folks try to evacuate. I saw overnight, looking at the traffic maps, still I-75 all night long was showing red, indicating very slow travel.
Jen, they were suggesting for some people, if you were, say, like in Palm Beach County, to go south to Alligator Alley over and then go up to the west coast of Florida to evacuate. But now that's not even a really viable option, seeing that the track is shifting west. We are ceasing operations at Fort Lauderdale Airport tonight at 7:45, Orlando Saturday at 5. But Jen, I've got to tell you a story. I have a friend who texted me. Her mother was about to take off yesterday, but 7 minutes before the flight, they canceled it, Jen, because they didn't have a crew. So that's the other problem. What if the crew's like, sorry, not coming in. I got to get, my stuff ready. Flights might be canceled.
Well, exactly. And I know for TSA example, too, they're bringing in extra TSA agents to allow those folks who need to evacuate to get home and get their stuff together and get out.
All right, Jen, we want to talk about the evacuations. I know you mentioned them there in the Charleston area. This is a great website, floridadisaster.org. If you go to /public mapping, you just type in your home address and it tells you if you need to evacuate. It's very user-friendly. You can zoom into the map. Now, we know the Keys, mandatory evacuation there for all the zones. So hopefully everyone is out of the Keys here. Mandatory evacuation not only for the residents, but obviously for the visitors. They actually pull the visitors out first in all these instances. Miami-Dade, mandatory evacuation zone. A and B, parts of C, barrier islands, and mobile homes. Broward County, mandatory mobile home, barrier island, and coastal areas east of Federal Highway. Palm Beach, mandatory 10 a.m. on Friday for zones A and B, including mobile homes and barrier islands. So what are these zones? Again, you can go to that website. We'll show you real quick here. Miami-Dade, there's your zone A and B, colors red and yellow, and that evacuation area is going to extend anywhere from North Miami Beach down towards Cutler Bay as well. And Collier County, mandatory for Goodland, Everglades City, several areas there. Strongly advised for mobile homes. You need to be in a very strong structure for this. And Kelly, I think that's one of the other keys, is that you got to get into a strong structure. Mobile homes will not be able to handle the wind.
Exactly, Steph, and here's a very good reason why they're evacuating the coastline and the low-lying areas, because that storm surge is going to be very significant, especially through the Keys. We're talking 5 to 10 feet all the way rounding the coast over towards West Palm Beach as well, and over towards Bonita Springs. Obviously, it's that right front quadrant where we're most concerned about that rise of water, that push of water from the sea, and it can really do a lot of damage, obviously. So we've got to explain just how much water we're talking about here, because obviously it doesn't take much water to cause problems. Even when you get 1 to 3 foot storm surge, this is above normally dry ground, mind you, you're going to have all kinds of debris floating in that water. Now you're over my head when we're talking about 6, 7 feet of storm surge. That is likely to carry away vehicles, by the way. And then, of course, if it gets all the way up to 9 feet, that can be just devastating to a community. And Jim, as you know, basically, create a change along the geographical patterns.
Absolutely, guys. Storm surge is the #1 killer. As a matter of fact, we're going to see some horrible pictures come out of the Turks and Caicos because of just what Kelly was talking about, storm surge. Guys, again, a dangerous hurricane making its way towards South Florida for overnight Saturday and Sunday morning. Be prepared.